Her resignation letter trembled in her hand, ink smudged by tears. But before she could leave the office for good, the man she feared most looked up and said something that shattered everything she thought she knew about him. Have you ever reached a breaking point, ready to give up, only for someone's unexpected words to stop you? What did they say that made you stay? Now, let's dive back into the story. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you love stories that touch the heart and keep you thinking long after they end, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's begin. Rain tapped against the glass walls of the 27th floor like a soft applause for her misery. Claire sat motionless at her desk, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The blinking cursor on the screen mocked her, a pulsing reminder of how long she'd been pretending she was okay. The office had emptied an hour ago, but she stayed, like always, hoping the silence would make the pain quieter. It never did. Her resignation letter sat open. 2 sentences. That was all she could manage after 3 years of giving everything. She had rewritten it 5 times, deleting words like grateful and opportunity because they felt like lies. The truth was, she was broken. Exhausted. Invisible. Her boss, Daniel Reeves, the CEO everyone admired, the man whose name carried weight in every business magazine, hadn't noticed her trembling hands, or the way she avoided looking at herself in reflective surfaces lately. Not that he was cruel. He was simply distant. A man surrounded by numbers, not people. Claire leaned back in her chair, eyes glistening under the fluorescent light. The office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. A half-empty mug sat beside her monitor, the coffee long cold. She whispered to herself, "I can't keep doing this." Her voice cracked. That was the first honest sound she had made all week. For months she had tried to hold herself together, meeting deadlines, fixing mistakes others ignored, staying long after everyone left. She told herself that hard work would pay off, that someone would see her. But tonight, after another humiliating meeting where Daniel had dismissed her idea in front of the board, something inside her quietly collapsed. She opened her bag and slipped the resignation letter inside an envelope. Her hands shook as she sealed it. That was when she heard footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Measured. Her pulse spiked. It was him. Daniel Reeves never stayed this late. She quickly wiped her face and forced herself to stand. "Still here?" His deep voice echoed through the corridor as he approached, removing his cufflinks like a man trying to peel off the day. "Yes, just finishing up some reports," she said, her voice barely steady. He stopped a few feet away, his expression unreadable under the office light. His suit jacket hung perfectly, every line precise, as if his life could be ironed into order. "You've been here late 3 nights this week," he said, glancing toward her computer screen. "You should go home." Her throat tightened. "I was just about to." He nodded absently, then his gaze landed on the envelope in her hand. "What's that?" Her heart stumbled. "It's something I was going to leave on your desk. May I?" Before she could protest, he reached for it. His fingers brushed hers, just a second of contact, but enough for her to feel how cold his hand was. He opened the envelope, pulled out the letter, and read it silently. The silence stretched. Rain drummed harder against the glass. Claire wanted to disappear. She wanted to take back every word, every sentence. Finally, he looked up. His eyes weren't angry. They were searching. And that was somehow worse. "You were going to resign," he said quietly. She swallowed. "Yes." "Why?" The question hit her like a storm. No accusation. Just curiosity. But it cracked something open. She faltered, her voice trembling. "I don't think I belong here anymore. I try, but it never feels enough. You don't see me. Nobody does. I'm tired, Mr. Reeves." The truth hung in the air like lightning waiting to strike. Daniel didn't move. For a moment, he looked as if her words had struck somewhere deeper than he expected. He turned toward the window, his reflection pale against the rain. You think I don't see you? He said, almost to himself. She blinked, unsure if she should answer. He turned back to her, his voice lower now. You think I built this company without seeing the ones who carry it? Claire's chest rose and fell, breath shallow. Then why do I feel invisible? His jaw tightened, but not from anger, something else. Something older. Because I've forgotten what it means to be human, he said quietly. And you're reminding me. The words didn't make sense at first. But the tone, the fragile sincerity behind them, made her throat ache. He set the letter gently on her desk. Don't submit this yet. Tomorrow, come to my office. 10 o'clock. Why? She whispered. Because I owe you an apology. And a story. He walked away before she could respond. The echo of his footsteps faded down the hall. Claire stared after him, her mind racing. An apology? A story? From the man who never shared anything? She sank back into her chair, her heart pounding in confusion. The rain outside softened, like the sky itself was holding its breath. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. And she didn't know why. The next morning, the city gleamed under a cold sun. Claire's reflection in the elevator door looked composed, but her insides trembled like loose glass. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, Daniel's words echoed. I owe you an apology. And a story. She had no idea what that meant. All she knew was that she couldn't think about anything else. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, she felt like an intruder. The air smelled faintly of leather and cedarwood polish, the silence sharp. Daniel Reeves' office door stood half open. She knocked lightly. Come in, his voice called. He was standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. The skyline stretched behind him, sunlight breaking through low clouds. He looked human. Not the unreachable figure she'd built in her head. Sit, please, he said. She sat on the edge of the chair, clutching her notepad even though she knew this wasn't a work meeting. He studied her for a moment, then spoke quietly. I read your letter again last night. Her stomach tightened. I meant what I wrote, Mr. Reeves. I know, he said. That's why I didn't sleep either. She blinked. You didn't sleep? He gave a soft, humorless smile. When someone tells you you've forgotten how to be human, it's difficult to rest easy. Her face warmed. I didn't mean it that way. I was upset. No, he interrupted gently. You were right. The room fell silent again, except for the faint hum of the city below. Daniel sat across from her, folding his hands together on the desk. Do you know why I built this company, Claire? He asked. She shook her head. He looked out the window again, his expression distant. 10 years ago, I lost everything that made life worth anything. My wife, my daughter, all in one night. I buried myself in work so I wouldn't have to feel it. The meetings, the targets, the endless growth, it kept me from hearing the silence. Claire's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. The man who never smiled, never hesitated, was suddenly fragile before her. I used to tell myself that work was my redemption. He continued. If I built something powerful enough, maybe it would fill the hole they left. But all I've really built is distance. He paused, then met her eyes. And last night, when you said you felt invisible, I realized I've made everyone around me feel what I've been trying to escape, being unseen. Claire's throat tightened. The confession hung between them, heavy and raw. She whispered. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. Don't be. You were honest. That's something no one's dared to be with me in a long time. She wanted to say something, but her voice wouldn't come. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. You said you don't belong here. But maybe you're the only one who truly does. You still care. And this place needs people who care. Claire's eyes glistened. Why tell me this? Because I don't want you to leave believing you don't matter, he said. You matter more than you think, Claire. You reminded me that this company isn't numbers, it's people. And I can't lose that again. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The way he said her name, it didn't sound like a CEO speaking to an employee. It sounded like a man searching for meaning again. She lowered her eyes. You don't know how much that means to me. He smiled faintly. I think I do. The air between them softened. For the first time, she didn't feel small in his presence. She felt seen. Entirely seen. Daniel looked at her again. I want to ask you something unusual. Okay, she said hesitantly. Don't hand in your resignation, he said. Instead, I want you to work directly with me for a while. No filters. No hierarchy. Help me rebuild what this company lost, its heart. If you'll stay. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Work directly with you? Yes, he said simply. But not as an assistant. As someone whose voice I trust. She searched his face for any trace of condescension, but there was none. Only sincerity. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Say you'll think about it, he replied softly. Her lips trembled into a small, uncertain smile. I'll think about it. He nodded once, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Good. That's all I ask? As she stood to leave, he said something that made her stop. Claire, he called gently. She turned. You were right to want more. Don't ever apologize for that. The words landed deep, like sunlight breaking through a long, gray season. She nodded, blinking fast. When she stepped out of the office, her legs felt unsteady. The hallway seemed brighter somehow. The letter in her bag suddenly felt weightless. And for the first time in months, she felt something strange stirring inside her. Hope. Have you ever had someone see your worth right when you were ready to walk away? How did it change you? Let me know in the comments below. The next few days moved in a quiet, uneasy rhythm. Claire went to work as usual, but everything felt different now. Every time she passed Daniel's office, her chest tightened. She hadn't accepted his offer yet. She told herself she was still thinking, but the truth was, she was scared. Scared of what staying might mean. Scared of what it might awaken. She sat at her desk one morning, staring at the spreadsheet on her screen, but her mind wasn't on numbers. It was on his words. You matter more than you think. It had been years since anyone said something like that to her. She kept replaying the moment, his tone, his eyes, the way he looked less like a CEO and more like a man who'd once known pain. It was unsettling. Because she understood that kind of loneliness too well. Still, she tried to act normal. She answered emails, smiled at coworkers, even joined them for lunch for the first time in weeks. But deep down, she was restless. A quiet war raged between what her heart wanted and what her fear demanded. By Friday, Daniel hadn't mentioned his offer again. Part of her was relieved. Another part felt disappointed. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe it was easier to pretend nothing had happened. That afternoon, she saw him walking toward the elevator, phone pressed to his ear. He looked tense, his jaw set, his voice sharp, the way it always was in meetings. For a second, he glanced at her desk. Their eyes met briefly before he stepped inside, and the doors closed. Just like that, the distance was back. The wall. The illusion that they were nothing but boss and employee. Claire exhaled shakily, forcing herself to focus on her work. You imagined it, she told herself. He was being kind, that's all. But that night, when she got home, her apartment felt heavier than usual. She dropped her bag on the couch and sat in silence. The clock ticked in the kitchen. Outside, the city hummed. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and whispered, "Why can't I just move on?" Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse office. The city stretched beneath him in glittering silence. He'd stayed long after everyone left again. Old habits die hard. Claire's words haunted him. You don't see me. She was right. He hadn't seen her, or anyone, for years. Her honesty had shaken something loose inside him. something he didn't know how to handle. He picked up his phone twice to call her extension, but stopped both times. What would he even say? Thank you for reminding me I'm human? It sounded ridiculous. Besides, he had a rule: never get personal with employees. That rule had kept him safe. Controlled. Numb. But her face when she spoke that night, tired, sincere, trembling, kept intruding on his thoughts. He pressed his palms together and exhaled. Get it together, Reeves. She's an employee, not a lifeline. He stood and walked to the window. The reflection staring back at him looked older than he remembered. He hadn't realized how deeply he'd buried himself in work until now. And yet, for the first time, he didn't want to stay buried. The next morning, Claire arrived early. The sky was pale with dawn, the office quiet. She thought being early would help her avoid him. But when she entered the break room to grab coffee, she froze. Daniel was there, no suit jacket, just a white shirt and loosened tie, staring into his mug as if the world might reveal itself in the reflection. He turned when he heard her. Morning. Good morning, she said quickly, reaching for the coffee pot. A pause stretched between them. She could feel his gaze on her. Have you decided? He asked softly. She hesitated. About your offer? He nodded. I'm still thinking, she said, keeping her eyes on the mug in her hands. Fair enough. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I didn't expect an answer right away. Something in his tone made her glance up. There was a flicker of disappointment there. Or maybe she imagined it. She set her cup down. It's not that I don't appreciate what you said, Mr. Reeves. I do. It's just, working directly with you would change everything. Change isn't always bad, he said. No, she replied. But it's always risky. He looked at her then, really taking in her appearance. You're afraid it'll make things complicated. She swallowed. Wouldn't you be? His silence was the answer. Then, quietly, he said, I've lived half my life behind walls, Claire. I think I could handle a little complication. Her heart skipped, but she looked away. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because it sounds like more than business, she said softly. He froze. The air between them thickened with unspoken truth. For a moment neither moved. Then he straightened, slipping the mask of control back over his face. You're right. My apologies. The distance slammed back into place, colder than before. Claire nodded, gripping her cup. It's fine. I should get back to work. He gave a brief nod, then turned to leave. But just before he stepped out, he said quietly, without turning, For what it's worth, I'm not the only one afraid of change. When he left, she stood there motionless, his words echoing in her chest. The resistance between them wasn't just professional. It was emotional survival. Two wounded people, afraid that feeling again meant breaking open what they tried so hard to seal shut. But something was already breaking anyway. And neither could stop it. Rain lashed against the city windows that Monday afternoon, the kind that blurred skyscrapers into gray shadows. The company's quarterly review was scheduled that day, a high-stakes meeting Claire had spent the weekend preparing for. She hadn't spoken to Daniel since their tense moment in the break room. She told herself it was better this way. Professional. Safe. By 5:30 p.m., the conference room was full of executives. The long mahogany table gleamed under fluorescent lights, screens flickering with financial charts. Claire sat near the end, quietly taking notes, while Daniel led the meeting. He was calm, composed, and distant, the CEO again, not the man who once told her she mattered. When the discussion ended, most people left quickly, escaping into the storm. Daniel stayed behind to finalize a few details with Claire. She packed her notes, standing. I'll send you the updated projections tonight. He nodded absently, scrolling through his tablet. Good work on the marketing data, by the way. Thank you, she said, careful to keep her tone even. If there's nothing else, I'll. The lights flickered. A low rumble rolled through the building. Then darkness. Claire froze. The entire floor went black except for the emergency lights glowing faintly along the hallway. "What the?" she whispered. Daniel frowned, checking his phone. "Power outage. Probably the storm." He walked to the door, tried the handle, and then cursed under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me." "What?" she asked, uneasy. "The automatic security system locked the floor. Until power's restored, we can't get out." "You mean we're stuck here?" she said. He glanced at her, resigned. "Looks like it." For a few seconds neither spoke. The silence between them thickened like fog. Then Claire exhaled. "Great. Just what I needed." Daniel gave a small laugh, surprising both of them. "You and me both." The room felt suddenly smaller. The storm howled outside, wind rattling the windows. Claire crossed her arms, trying to appear calm, though her heart was thudding hard. "How long until it's back on?" "Could be an hour. Could be 3, he said, glancing at the storm radar on his phone. "You can wait in my office if you want. It's warmer." "I'll be fine here," she said quickly. "The break room's got water and snacks." He nodded once. "Suit yourself." But after 20 minutes, the chill from the air conditioning shutdown began to creep in. Claire shivered slightly, rubbing her arms. Daniel noticed. Without a word, he took off his suit jacket and handed it to her. She hesitated. "That's not necessary." "Take it," he said quietly. "You're shaking." Reluctantly, she accepted it. His jacket was warm, smelling faintly of cedar and something expensive, like steady calm she didn't have. "Thanks." He sat across from her, the flickering light painting his face in soft shadows. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "More than usual." "I've just been thinking," she replied. "About leaving?" Her eyes met his. "About everything." He leaned back, studying her. "You know, I've seen hundreds of people walk through these doors, chasing promotions, bonuses, titles. You're the first who looked like she wanted to escape instead of climb. Maybe because I never belonged in places like this," she said. "Why do you think that?" "Because people like me don't get noticed unless something goes wrong. I'm not the kind of person who makes a statement or changes the room." He smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong." Her brow furrowed. "Excuse me? The moment you walked in here, you changed something," he said simply. "You said what no one else would say. You looked at me like I was a person, not a paycheck. That doesn't happen often." She felt her breath catch. "You make it sound like that's a bad thing." "It's dangerous," he admitted softly. "Because I stopped seeing you as just another employee." Her heartbeat stumbled. "Daniel." He looked away, suddenly tense. "Forget I said that." "Too late," she whispered. Silence filled the room again, charged and unsteady. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing what neither of them could say. Claire stared down at her hands. "You don't have to explain anything. We're just different people." He exhaled. "Maybe. But for the first time, I wish we weren't." The words hit her like a tremor. She stood, pacing near the window. "You can't say things like that. You're my boss. I already look like I'm here out of pity. Is that what you think I feel? Pity?" His voice rose slightly, sharper now. She turned to him, eyes wet. "What else would it be, Daniel? You don't even know me." He stood too, closing the space between them but stopping just short. "You're right. I don't know everything about you. But I see enough to know you care too much. You fight harder than people twice your rank. And you still think you're invisible." Her throat tightened. "Because that's what the world keeps proving." "Then let me prove something else," he said quietly. The storm thundered, lightning flashing across the windows, illuminating both of them in a moment that felt suspended in air, too fragile, too real. Neither spoke. The only sound was their breathing, shallow and uneven. Then, from the hallway, the lights flickered back on. The hum of electricity filled the silence. Claire stepped back, heart racing. "The power's back." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah. He moved to the door, opened it, and stood aside. You should get home before it starts again. She grabbed her bag, avoiding his eyes. Thank you for the jacket. Keep it, he said. She hesitated, then nodded and walked out, her pulse still drumming in her ears. When she reached the elevator, she glanced back. Daniel was still standing by the door, watching her go, expression unreadable. For the first time, she wasn't sure which scared her more, leaving him behind or wanting to stay. Sometimes, the people who challenge your walls the most are the ones meant to change your story. What do you think Daniel meant when he said, I stopped seeing you as just another employee? The next morning, the office buzzed with nervous energy. News had spread that the board was visiting unexpectedly. Daniel's schedule was packed, his tone clipped and professional. He walked through the corridors like a storm contained in a suit. Claire did her best to focus on her tasks, pretending the night before hadn't happened. The memory of the boardroom, his words, his nearness, kept replaying in her mind like a film she couldn't pause. She told herself it meant nothing. Just the stress of being trapped together. Just words spoken under pressure. But deep down, she knew they weren't just words. By afternoon, she received a message from Daniel's assistant. Mr. Reeves needs you in his office. Urgent. Her heart sank. She straightened her blouse, took a steadying breath, and walked upstairs. When she stepped into his office, he was standing by the window, staring out at the skyline. Papers littered his desk. He didn't turn immediately. You wanted to see me? She asked. He turned slowly. His face was unreadable. Close the door. The way he said it made her chest tighten. She did as told, her pulse quickening. I assume you've heard the board's decision, he said. I haven't, she admitted. He exhaled. They want to restructure the department. Which means, your position might be dissolved in the next few weeks. Her stomach dropped. Wait, what? After everything? I argued against it, he said quickly. But they're cutting costs. The irony is, they want me to announce it at the meeting later. Claire blinked, shock turning to anger. So that's it. After all the promises about value and potential, I'm just gone. Claire. No, don't. Her voice trembled, but she stood her ground. You told me I mattered. That I wasn't invisible. Was that just another corporate speech? He flinched slightly. You know it wasn't. Do I? She said bitterly. Because right now, I feel like the same disposable employee I was before I walked into your office crying. He stepped closer. That's not what this is. Then what is it, Daniel? Because every time I start to believe you mean something, every time you look at me like I'm more than a number, you pull away again. His jaw tightened. You think this is easy for me? Shouldn't it be? She said. You have the power. You decide who stays and who goes. I'm just a woman who works too late and gets thanked for coffee orders. Don't you dare reduce yourself like that, he snapped. Her eyes burned. Then stop treating me like I'm replaceable. He went silent, breathing hard. The air between them pulsed with anger, fear, and something deeper neither could name. Finally, he spoke, quieter now, almost breaking. Do you think I don't see you, Claire? Every late night you've spent here. Every time you double-check reports no one else cares about. Every time you try to disappear because you're afraid to take up space. She stared at him, unable to speak. I notice, he said. And it kills me that I can't fix what the board is about to do. I tried. I risked more than you know. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk anything for me? He hesitated, eyes flickering with something raw. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just another employee. Her breath caught. Daniel. He took a step forward, voice low. You made me feel human again. And I don't know how to unfeel that. Tears pricked her eyes. You can't say things like that, not now. I have to, he said, finally breaking the distance between them. Because if I don't, you'll walk out of here thinking none of it mattered. Maybe it didn't, she whispered, though her voice shook with the lie. He shook his head slowly. Don't do that. Don't pretend you didn't feel it too. She turned away, trembling. It doesn't matter what I felt. We can't fix this. You're my boss. I'm about to lose my job. There's nothing left to say. There's everything left to say, he countered. You think I care about the titles, the rules, the company? I'd trade half of it if it meant keeping what I almost had with you. She froze. Almost had? He stepped closer. The connection we keep running from. Her throat tightened. Daniel, please. I'm not asking for anything, he said, voice rough. I just need you to know I meant every word. You matter. You changed me. You made me see the kind of man I'd forgotten I could be. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Why now? Why say this when you know it only makes it harder? Because truth always does, he said softly. But silence hurts more. The words hung in the air like confession and surrender all at once. Claire covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. For the first time, he didn't try to stop her. He just stood there, watching her with the look of someone who'd already lost too much in life to lie again. After a long silence, she said quietly, I don't know what to do with that. Neither do I, he admitted. But if you walk out of here, I want you to know one thing, none of this was pity. It was respect. And maybe something more I wasn't ready to admit. She met his eyes, heart aching with everything they couldn't be. I wish you hadn't said it. Me too, he said. The intercom buzzed suddenly, cutting through the tension. His assistant's voice came through. Mr. Reeves, the board is waiting. He didn't move, didn't look away. Go, she whispered. They need you. I need you more, he murmured. But she turned and walked toward the door, holding herself together by sheer will. Just before stepping out, she said softly, without looking back, Then you should have said that sooner. And she left him standing there, alone again, but changed forever. The board meeting ended hours ago, but Claire still sat at her desk, motionless. Around her, the office was empty, only the faint hum of air conditioning and the city lights pressing against the windows. Her resignation letter lay folded beside her keyboard, unsigned. Her screen glowed with unread emails, but she didn't see any of them. All she could hear was Daniel's voice from earlier that day. You made me feel human again. You changed me. You matter. Words that should have healed her somehow hurt worse. She pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the weight of what hadn't been said, that she felt the same. That somewhere between reports, late nights, and awkward smiles, she'd started caring for the one man she never should have. But he was the boss. The millionaire CEO. The man whose world she didn't belong in. Her phone buzzed, a message from Daniel's assistant. Mr. Reeves requested all staff to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Important announcement. She stared at it for a long moment before whispering to herself. So it's real. I'm gone. Her throat burned, but she forced herself to gather her things. Her notebook. The coffee mug she'd kept since her first day. The little paper crane she'd made during a late-night brainstorming session. She tucked them into her bag, one by one, like pieces of herself she was trying to quietly erase. As she turned off her monitor, she glanced toward the glass office at the end of the corridor. The lights were still on. She could see him inside, Daniel, alone, head bowed, fingers pressed to his temples. For a moment, she wanted to go in. To say something. Anything. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered under her breath, "Goodbye," and walked away. Daniel didn't notice her leave. Not at first. He'd been staring at the numbers on the presentation screen for nearly an hour, but none of them made sense. The board had approved the restructuring. Half the staff would be reassigned, and Claire's role was officially dissolved. He had done everything, argued, negotiated, offered alternatives, but in the end, the board saw her as a number on a ledger, not a person. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling hard. His reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. He'd built this empire to feel in control, to protect himself from the chaos of feeling too deeply. But today, a woman's tears had broken through everything he thought was armor. He thought of the look on her face when she said, You should have said that sooner. He hadn't realized until now how much those words cut. She was right. Timing was everything, and he'd spent too long hiding behind rules, scared of what might happen if he let himself care openly. A soft knock pulled him from his thoughts. It was his assistant. Sir, the car's waiting. Daniel nodded wearily. Go ahead. I'll walk. Are you sure? Yes, he said. I need the air. Outside, the city was drenched in golden lamplight. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered. Daniel walked without direction, just moving, as if motion could quiet his thoughts. Every corner of downtown reminded him of her. The cafe where she spilled coffee that first week. The bench outside where she once cried after a client yelled at her. He remembered stopping, wanting to comfort her, but saying nothing. That had been his pattern, feeling everything and saying nothing. Tonight, the silence finally felt like punishment. He passed the florist's stand still open late. The scent of lilies drifted into the cool air. Without thinking, he bought a single white rose. The florist wrapped it carefully, but he barely noticed. He just held it in his hand as he walked, a fragile apology he'd never deliver. When he finally reached his penthouse, he set the rose on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered to no one, I should have told her sooner. Meanwhile, Claire lay awake in her small apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She hadn't planned to stay much longer, even before today. Maybe she'd move to a smaller city, find a quieter job. Somewhere, she wouldn't feel invisible. But part of her didn't want to leave yet. Not without hearing from him. Not without knowing whether what he said meant anything beyond the moment. She unlocked her phone, hesitated, and opened her email. No messages. Her cursor hovered over the compose button. She started typing. Subject, about today message, I just wanted to say thank you for. She stopped. Backspaced the words. Tried again. Message, I understand. You don't have to explain. Then she deleted that too. Finally, she just closed her laptop. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't make it hurt more. She lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, tears tracing down her temples. Somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't just about losing a job. It was about losing the one person who made her believe she was worth more than her mistakes. And as the city lights flickered through her blinds, she whispered, You should have said it sooner, too. Have you ever held back your feelings until it was too late to say them? What would you have said if you had one last chance? The next morning, the sky over the city was gray, heavy with rain again. Claire stood outside the office building for a long moment before walking in, clutching her umbrella like a shield. She'd barely slept. Her stomach churned with a dull ache, the kind that came when you'd already cried yourself empty. Inside, everyone moved with anxious energy. Rumors had spread overnight about the restructuring. Faces looked tense, whispers darting between desks like static. She took her usual seat and tried to steady her breathing. She wasn't sure if Daniel would even show up for the announcement. A part of her hoped he wouldn't. She wasn't ready to see him again. At exactly 9, the meeting room doors opened. Daniel walked in, flanked by 2 board members. His expression was calm, professional, unreadable. The same mask he wore in every press interview. But when his eyes brushed hers, just for a second, the mask slipped. He looked broken. He began to speak. Thank you for coming in early, everyone. I'll keep this brief. His voice was steady, but softer than usual. The company's facing a new operational shift. Several departments will be merged or restructured. A few positions will be dissolved. This wasn't an easy decision, and it's not one I made lightly. He paused. I want to personally thank those affected for your hard work and dedication. None of this reflects your value. It's simply a change in direction. His eyes flicked to Claire for a fraction of a second before he continued. Effective immediately, the Public Relations and Community Outreach Division will be discontinued. The words hit like a punch. That was her department. A quiet gasp rippled through the room. Claire felt every pair of eyes turn toward her. She kept her face perfectly still, but inside she was collapsing. Daniel went on, reading the names of those being released. When he said hers, his voice caught, just slightly, but enough for her to hear. Enough to make her want to scream. When the meeting ended, everyone filed out in uneasy silence. She didn't move. Couldn't. Finally, Daniel looked up from his notes and said quietly, "Claire, stay for a moment." Her pulse thudded in her ears. She stood slowly, every step toward him feeling heavier than the last. When the doors shut behind them, the silence filled the space like fog. He spoke first. "You deserve better than this. Don't," she said, voice trembling. "Don't make it sound noble. I fought for you," he said, almost pleading. "I did everything I could." She laughed bitterly. "Then why do I feel like I just got thrown away?" He took a step closer. "Because you're hurt. And you have every right to be. But don't think for a second this is what I wanted." Her eyes burned, but she held his gaze. "You know what hurts the most? Not losing the job. Losing the belief that you actually cared. I did care. You say that, but then you stand there and read my name off a list like it's just business. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice," she whispered. "You just didn't choose me." That broke something in him. His voice cracked as he said, "I couldn't protect you without risking the company. And if I lose that, then you lose your power." She cut in. "And God forbid Daniel Reeves ever looks powerless." He looked away sharply, guilt written across his face. For a long, painful silence, neither spoke. Then Claire took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I'm done, Daniel. You don't need to pretend this is anything more than it was." "It wasn't pretending," he said, his voice low, desperate. "You meant something to me. Then why didn't you fight harder?" He stepped closer, his voice rough. "Because every time I tried to fight for someone I loved before, I lost everything. And I couldn't survive that again." Her breath caught. The honesty in his words was like a wound ripped open. "Someone you loved?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then said quietly, "My wife. 5 years ago. I risked everything for her health, the business, the board's trust, my reputation. I lost her anyway. I told myself I'd never let my heart make decisions again. Until you." Her chest tightened painfully. She saw it now, the man behind the title. A man terrified of loss. She wanted to forgive him. To tell him she understood. But before she could speak, his assistant knocked, then opened the door halfway. "Sir, the press is waiting for your statement." Daniel turned away, hiding his face for a moment before nodding. "I'll be right there." The assistant left. Silence again. Claire looked at him one last time. "Go," she whispered. "They're waiting." He looked back at her, his voice breaking just a little. "And if I walk out that door, you're gone." She nodded slowly. "Then I guess this is goodbye." He wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't. He just watched as she picked up her bag, slipped on her coat, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused, just once, and turned back. "You once told me silence hurts more than truth," she said softly. "Remember that." Then she was gone. Daniel stood alone in the empty room, surrounded by echoes of everything he'd never said. Outside, the rain started again, tapping against the windows like a quiet reminder of all that was lost. He pressed a hand against the glass, whispering to himself, "I remember." But it was too late. Sometimes love doesn't end in a fight, it ends in silence. Have you ever walked away from someone not because you wanted to, but because staying hurt too much? The next few days blurred together like rain on glass. For the first time in years, Claire didn't have a schedule to follow. No alarm ringing at dawn. No deadlines. No nervous laughter over coffee in the break room. Just silence, thick, stretching, endless. Her apartment felt smaller now. The boxes she had packed still sat untouched near the door, as if waiting for her to make a decision she no longer wanted to make. She told herself she'd start over, find a new job, maybe a new city. But every time she opened her laptop to search listings, her chest tightened. It wasn't just the job she missed. It was him. The long glances in the hallway. The way he listened when no one else did. The way his voice softened only when he spoke her name. She tried to forget, but forgetting someone who once made you feel seen was like trying to unhear a melody that once saved you. Late that night, as she sat by her window watching the city lights, her phone buzzed. A new message. From Daniel Reeves. Subject, no title. I know I have no right to write this. But there are things I didn't say. Things I couldn't say in that room. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know, it wasn't a lack of care. It was fear. You reminded me what it meant to feel again. And that scared me more than losing everything. D. She read it once. Then again. Her heart twisted. He hadn't asked her to come back. He hadn't promised anything. But the words, you reminded me what it meant to feel again, settled deep inside her like warmth after a long winter. For the first time since leaving, she smiled through tears. Because even if nothing else changed, at least she knew it had been real. She typed a reply. Then stopped. Deleted it. Rewrote it again. I don't know what to say. But thank you? For saying something. She hovered over send, then paused. Maybe it wasn't time yet. Maybe she needed to find her footing first. She saved it as a draft, and closed her laptop. For the first time in days, she slept peacefully. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his penthouse office, still in his suit, staring at the city skyline that looked less like triumph now and more like distance. He'd sent the email hours ago, and hadn't checked his inbox since. It was easier not to hope. The board had praised his composure during the layoffs, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. He'd shown up, shaken hands, smiled for the cameras, all the things expected of a man in control. But inside, every smile felt like betrayal. His assistant had noticed the change. Sir, you've been working late all week, she said gently. You need rest. He only muttered. Rest doesn't help when you can't escape your thoughts. That night, he walked through the empty corridors of the company he'd built, every step echoing in the quiet. He stopped by the glass wall that overlooked the floor where Claire used to sit. Her desk was cleared, no mug, no notebook, no paper crane. Just absence. He pressed a hand to the glass, remembering her laughter, the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the gentle sarcasm in her voice when she challenged him. He realized then that for all his success, he'd built a fortress so tall it kept out not just pain, but love. The question that had haunted him for days returned, was I protecting my company, or protecting myself? He sat at her old desk, the leather chair creaking softly under his weight. On instinct, he opened the drawer. Inside, he found something small, a sticky note, folded once. In her handwriting. You said silence hurts more than truth. Don't forget that. He closed his eyes, breath catching. He didn't know if she'd left it there intentionally or forgotten it. Either way, it felt like an invitation. A challenge. He took out his phone and opened her contact, thumb hovering over the call button. He hesitated. What could he say now? Come back? I'm sorry? I miss you? Every word felt too small. He put the phone down, gripping the note instead. Then, slowly, he whispered to the empty room. I don't want to forget. The next morning, Claire woke to sunlight spilling across her bed. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and saw his email again. This time, she didn't cry. She just read it quietly, smiling at how raw and human it was. She clicked reply. You once said silence hurts more than truth. I'm tired of silence. If you still mean what you wrote, I'll be at the park near the office at 6 p.m. today. If you don't show, I'll understand. Her hand shook slightly as she hit send. At exactly 6:04 p.m., Daniel stood by the fountain in the park. The air smelled of rain, and the sky glowed soft gold. He looked around nervously, checking his watch every few seconds. He almost didn't believe she'd come. Then he saw her, walking down the path in a light blue coat, hair loose, eyes searching. The moment their eyes met, the noise of the city seemed to fade. Neither spoke at first. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was waiting, fragile, hopeful. Finally, Claire broke it. You came. I would have come sooner, he said softly. If I'd known how. She smiled faintly. You figured it out. He stepped closer, unsure. Are you leaving the city? I was going to, she said. But I didn't want to leave with things unfinished. He nodded, swallowing hard. There's so much I wish I'd done differently. Then start differently, she said. He looked at her, eyes filled with quiet gratitude. You really want to start again? She hesitated, then nodded. But this time, not as CEO and employee. Just two people who got lost and maybe found each other at the wrong time. He smiled for the first time in days. Maybe timing's something we can fix. The rain started again, light, soft, cleansing. Neither moved. He reached out a hand slowly, as if asking permission. She took it. And in that simple touch, all the walls between them fell away. Would you take a second chance with someone who once broke your heart, if you believed they truly changed? The rain eased into a soft drizzle that shimmered in the park's lamplight. Claire and Daniel stood side by side beneath the awning of the fountain's arch, still holding hands. Neither wanted to be the first to speak. It wasn't awkwardness, it was reverence. After everything they'd said, and everything they hadn't, silence finally felt safe between them. I didn't think you'd come, Daniel said quietly, eyes fixed on the rippling water. I almost didn't, Claire admitted. Then I realized I'd regret wondering what if for the rest of my life. He smiled faintly. I've lived with a lot of regrets lately. Maybe that's how change starts, she said. When the regret finally outweighs the fear. He turned to her, studying her face, not searching for forgiveness, just seeing her. The rain had left droplets clinging to her hair, and her eyes reflected a softness he hadn't earned but desperately hoped to. Claire, he began. I know I hurt you. I thought keeping distance was a strength. I thought not needing anyone made me unbreakable. But you were the only one who ever saw the cracks and didn't run. Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. You didn't have to be unbreakable. You just had to be honest. He nodded slowly. I'm trying to be. Starting now. They stood in silence for a moment longer. Around them, the city moved. Laughter from the nearby cafe, cars passing, the scent of rain and earth. Life went on. Then, quietly, she said, So what now? Daniel exhaled. I don't know. Maybe we start small. Coffee without boardroom politics. Conversations that don't end with silence. Claire smiled, faint but real. That sounds normal. Normal might be good for us. She laughed softly. The first real laugh he'd heard from her in months. It sounded like home. Over the next few weeks, they kept their promise. It started with coffee on Fridays. Then long walks through the park on Sundays. They didn't talk about work or the past. They talked about books, music, things that made them both feel alive again. Daniel began to see the world differently, less as a balance sheet, more as a series of moments that couldn't be measured but could be lost. He delegated more, smiled more, even apologized to employees he'd once dismissed without thought. Word spread through the company that something had changed in him. Claire, meanwhile, took a consulting role for a charity foundation, one Daniel quietly funded but never mentioned. She'd wanted a place where her work meant something again, and for the first time, she woke up each morning without dread. Sometimes she'd still stop by the cafe near the old office. And sometimes she'd find him there, already waiting, 2 coffees in hand, one black, one with cinnamon and oat milk. You remembered, she'd tease. I never forgot, he'd say. Months later, one evening as autumn began to paint the trees gold, they found themselves walking along the same path where they met again. It's strange, she said. How something that once hurt so much could lead here. He nodded. I think pain has a way of breaking the things we shouldn't keep. She smiled. Like fear. Like pride, he added. They walked in silence for a few more steps before she asked, "Do you ever think about what might have happened if we'd done things differently?" "All the time," he said. "But then I realize, if we had, maybe we wouldn't have learned what mattered." She looked up at him, her expression soft. "And what matters?" He met her gaze. "People. Not success. Not control. Just people who make us remember we're still human." Her hand brushed his. This time, she didn't pull away. Later that night, Daniel returned to his apartment and opened the drawer where he'd kept her sticky note. He unfolded it once more. "You said silence hurts more than truth. Don't forget that." He smiled, then placed a new note beside it. "I didn't forget. You reminded me every day." He closed the drawer gently. At that moment, he realized the empire he'd built was never the achievement he'd believed it was. His true success was learning to speak, to feel, to love, and to be loved in return. A few days later, Claire found herself back at the office for a brief visit, this time not as an employee, but as a guest speaker for a mentorship program Daniel had started. When she entered the conference room, she paused. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, just as it had the day she almost resigned in tears. She glanced around at the young employees filling the seats, nervous and eager. Daniel stood by the podium, watching her with quiet pride. When it was her turn to speak, she smiled and said, "I used to think strength meant never breaking. Now I know it means choosing to rebuild, even when it hurts." The room was silent, then filled with gentle applause. As she stepped down, Daniel met her halfway. "You were incredible," he said. She smiled. "You helped me remember who I was. And you helped me become who I should have been all along." For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people who'd lost everything they thought they needed, only to find what truly mattered. He offered his hand. She took it without hesitation. They walked on, two people no longer defined by pain or pride, but by the quiet strength of having survived both. The camera would pull back here if this were a movie. The music would rise softly. The lights of the village would blur into gold. And the story that began with tears and resignation would end not with grand gestures, but with peace, the kind that only comes when love chooses to stay. What lessons did you learn from Claire and Daniel's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else might need your insight today. And if stories like this inspire you, make sure to follow our channel for more powerful, emotional journeys that remind us what love, courage, and second chances truly mean.
Thank you so much for watching this story till the end. I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. We've got so many more inspiring stories waiting for you, so go ahead and click the video on your screen to enjoy the next one. You're going to love it.